On today's show, by popular request, we're going to be talking about the Clippers Mount Rushmore going into this season. Who would be on it? Going to be joined by a special guest to talk about it all on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA, been a Clipper fan for 20 years, been covering the team for 5 on my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, and 3 right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know every single time we post a video on the road to 8,000 subs before the start of the season. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. And this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Clippers Mount Rushmore. Now, of course, the Clippers aren't the most storied franchise in NBA history, but we are slowly getting better as a franchise. And joining me to discuss who makes our Mount Rushmore, we're going to have our own separate ones, is Clipper beat writer for the Sporting Tribune and Clipper fan, Grant Money Mona. Money Mona, welcome back to the show.
Dude, it's so great to be on here. I remember like last year I was on here and, I was just getting started with the beat reporting thing. You gave me an opportunity. So I got to say shout out to you, Dime, because this is one of the first shows that I did en route to me being a beat reporter full-time for the first year at Into a Dome. And obviously I've grown since then. You've grown since then. We saw each other at Summer League. We saw each other at the Chris Paul event. So kind of a full circle thing here 1 year later in August. So it's good to see you, man.
Yeah, dude. It's been amazing to seeing your rise there. And what was our topic that we talked about when you first came on?
We talked about the Clippers draft picks and like how good their draft picks have been. And I was talking about, T-Man was like one of their best draft picks of the past 10 years. And now T-Man is on the Brooklyn Nets. So,
yeah. So let's begin. We each have our own Mount Rushmores. For the audience, we are not including the Buffalo guys. That's no disrespect to them. It's just separating it. LA Clippers and Braves. Of course, if we were to include the Buffalo guys, I think Bob McAdoo would have to be there, and probably Randy Smith would have to be there, given he's number one in scoring and in so many statistical categories. So Randy Smith, shout out to him. Shout out to Bob McAdoo, who was our only ever regular season MVP. But to begin the show, we're going to go with one of the more obvious ones. The newest Clipper, but not really the newest. I think we both had CP3 on there. Money Mona, Chris Paul, unanimous Clipper Mount Rushmore. Tell me how you feel about him, but also his return to the team, since I haven't heard your thoughts on it on this show.
Yeah, Diamond, it's crazy we bring this up because, before he was signed and before all this stuff in the 2025 offseason happened, I was going back and forth with some obviously not Clipper fans because they don't understand it, but I was saying that CP3 is a Clipper legend, and this person was like, what are you talking about? A legend? You have to win championships there. You have to be a guy that has brought winning to an organization, to a franchise. And I was like, well, he did. Like, he changed that era. He was the quarterback of the Lob City era, essentially. That is a legend. Clipper fans consider CP3 a legend, a franchise legend. And he was like, I don't believe it. I don't understand it. And it just made me think, like, Clipper fans understand their franchise better than people on the outside, obviously. But, like, people on the outside don't understand, I think, still the franchise's history and what the players have went through, what the fans have went through, what the history of the team is. So when they see a guy like Chris Paul, Dime, and they're like, hey, what did he win? It's like, that's not the point. Like, the Clippers have not been a team like the Lakers where they won in the 60s and they won in the 80s and they've had this storied history. They're not that type of franchise. So you have to really be careful with who you pick on this Mount Rushmore, because it's not that many guys that you can pick from. There are players that we're going to pick from, but Chris Paul, for me, is at the top alongside Blake Griffin, and we'll get to BG, but he was CP was a 4-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA with the Clippers. And, a lot of people on the outside are going to be like, what? 4 times? That's not even that much. But like, it's just like who he was to the franchise, and just seeing that player now getting to the current kind of state of the Clippers, like seeing that guy return. You were there, you were at the event, the return press conference and everything. He was emotional about coming back to the Clippers. Like, fans showered him with CP3 chants. I believe you and DL2 and Jamal were the ones that started that. So shout out to you guys. But it's deserved. It shows you like time heals all wounds, because when he left, it was like, he left a lot on the table. He was still a legend, but like, there was like, I kind of wish we would have made a conference finals. They didn't, but now looking back on it, like, that was such a fun era of Clippers basketball. He deserves to be on this Mount Rushmore, and I'm just so excited, even if his role is not large, to have him back in Clippers colors to end his career. I think it's just so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best, but if you want to talk about some of the individual stuff, I mean, 6 years, and all 6 of those years, this guy was an all-star player. The only year he did not make the all-star team for us was 2017, only because he had some injuries in the first half of the season. He was the first all-star game MVP as an LA Clipper. He was a 3-time All-NBA first-team member as an LA Clipper in 2012, 13, and 14. And then he made the second team in 15 and 16, made the defensive team in all 6 years as a Clipper, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. And, of course, led the league in assists in 14 and 15 as a Clipper, and led the league in steals 2011, 12, 13, and 14 as a Clipper. And more importantly, every season was a winning season, and we finished no lower than 5th in any season. Before Chris Paul, we hadn't even made the playoffs 3 consecutive years. Not only were we making the playoffs 3 consecutive years, we're getting 30-plus nationally televised games. We have a guy that's in top 5 conversations in the league on our team. And as much as I love Blake Griffin, as you said, Chris Paul brought that legitimacy, that we're going to win games. And I noticed it from the very first game he played on Christmas Day of 2011 against the Warriors. Late in the game, he took over with some big-time mid-ranges, and that's when I knew we have a superstar in the building again. Like, Blake Griffin's a young rising star, but Chris Paul is a guy who's established already, who has shown that he can take his team past the first round. And yes, we didn't make it past the second round, which technically wasn't, any better than the 06 team, but he changed the culture. Every year, sellouts. Every time bad teams came to play us, there was a chance we would just kick their ass all over the floor and like put on a Lob City convention against them. So CP3, and then more than anything, I mentioned the individual stuff, but it's about the moments. I think when you make these kinds of lists as a fan, it's about the moments that these players give you. That first season when we beat Memphis, that was special. We had some disappointment, but we beat the Warriors with undergoing an ownership change that was like a scandalous thing. You know what I'm saying? And then 2015 against the Spurs. Unfortunately, Chris hurt his hamstring and wasn't 100% in that Rockets series. No excuses. We still should have won, but incredible memories. And then the last 2 years, he kind of carried a team with Blake Griffin not 100% for 2 straight years. For me, I was never too mad at his exit. I know a lot of people were. We obviously had the tunnel incident. And then, of course, the Phoenix Suns series. We played them twice in the playoffs, and he beat us twice. But ultimately, for him to come back, it's such a feel-good story. For me, it's an absolute no-brainer. I'm going to let you add on to that if you want, but also tell me if you think he's the greatest Clipper of all time now that he's come back. And by the way, just to further show his case, in terms of minutes played, 8th all-time in Clipper history. That's including the Buffalo guys. Field goals made, 9th all-time. Field goal attempts, 6th all-time. Of course, the leader in assists. And, of course, the leader, let's say, sixth highest points all-time of the franchise. Of course, as I mentioned, number 1 in assists, number 2 in steals. I mean, number 1 in steals per game, number 1 in assists per game. He's done a lot of great things as a Clipper.
Yeah, I think the biggest part that you mentioned was the all-defensive honors, because you can go to Blake Griffin and say, like, okay, well, his his accolades match Chris Paul essentially because their timelines kind of matched. But, the fact that he was a 6-time first, all defense guy at his size, I mean, that's one of the biggest, like, I wouldn't say knocks on his career, but it's one of the biggest kind of marks on his career is that, he was this guy that was such an awesome player for his size. I mean, Dime, you remember, like, you're talking about a guy that was legitimate coming to the Clippers. The Clippers really didn't have that type of player come to the Clippers and say, I want to be a Clipper. Like, I want to re-up with the Clippers. I want to re-sign here. I want to get us to a spot to where we are talked about like one of the best teams in the league. Like, we are put, like you mentioned, on national TV. And that impact right there, like, you can talk about the stats all you want. I know I just brought up the all defensive stuff, but that fact right there, like coining the Lob City term, that stranglehold that era had, not just on Clipper fans, Dime, but like it was worldwide. Like, everyone in the world during the mid 2010s knew what Lob City was. They knew who Chris Paul was. They knew who Blake Griffin was. And you can't just dismiss that because they didn't win a championship. You can't just dismiss that because they didn't get to a conference final. So I think CP is way up there. If he's not one, he has to be two, but I think he's number one. And the fact that he's the guy that really shifted things for the Clippers. I know Blake Griffin, when he was drafted, he did, but CP was the guy that came in and was like, I know I was a star with Charlotte, but I want to be a star here in Los Angeles, and not, or New Orleans, sorry, not with Los Angeles Lakers. I want to be a star with the Los Angeles Clippers, and that usually never happens. So that's why he has my respect always.
Yes, sir. And coming up, though, we've talked about him already. Going to be speaking about the most popular Clipper of all time, Mr. BG. I got to tell you a little something about Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. When I run my club team, I got to make sure I answer all the calls, make sure all the parents are getting responded to, and all that. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. Open Phone lets me manage business calls and texts from a single app. So it's very easy for me to separate my personal calls and my business calls for my club team and whatever it may be. Open Phone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, so talking about the Clippers Mount Rushmore here with Grant Money Mona of the Sporting Tribune. I think it's going to be really fun when we get to the end. I think we're doing the obvious ones first, but CP3, culture changer. You had him as the best Clipper of all time. I think now that he's come back, people are more comfortable with that take. I think the last couple of years, everybody was kind of on the Blake Griffin train. I probably still, even though I'm a pro point guard, Chris Paul was my favorite player when we had them both. I would probably lean Blake by a tad just because he never wanted to leave and he was drafted by us. But let's talk about Blake. I mean, obviously, unanimous choice here. Changed everything in the sense that, maybe Chris Paul is the one that brought all the winning, but Chris Paul never would agree to be a Clipper if it weren't for having Blake here. And the excitement, we were the most exciting team in the NBA even before we got Chris Paul, arguably because of Blake Griffin in that 2010-11 season. I think we got a little bit numb as a fan base to the type of stuff that this guy would do on a nightly basis, and DeAndre Jordan as well included in that. And I think we'll mention his name a little bit later as well, if he doesn't make it, honorable mention. But Blake Griffin, I mean, what can you say about the guy? This guy was Mr. Clipper. In so many ways, he represented the good and the bad of our franchise. Injured before he even stepped foot in an NBA regular season game, injuries throughout his tenure, a lot of what ifs, but ultimately some really fun moments. 6th all-time in Clipper games played, 3rd in minutes, second in field goals made, second in field goals attempted, second in 2-point field goals made, and 2-point field goals attempted. And of course, number 3 in rebounds, number 5 in assists, number 6 in steals. And where is points? I'm almost positive he's number 2. I'm almost
He
positive.
is.
He's
Yeah,
number
he
2,
is.
right?
He's behind Randy Smith, man. What a career.
Right?
Sheesh.
So,
But yeah, BG was second.
so go ahead, man. Blake Griffin. Yeah, he's second in points. I mean, incredible run. Changed it all. BG.
Yeah, it's tough to make the decision between who is the best Clipper of all time between the two. You know, I know I mentioned Chris Paul, but I could have easily said Blake Griffin. Much like you said, like we both said about the impact of Chris Paul, the impact of Blake Griffin could have been even more significant just because, like you said, he was drafted by the Clippers. He was a guy coming out of Oklahoma that everyone was excited about, like his high flying act. People saw it in college, right? And people were excited for that. The fact that the Clippers got him, and then obviously he has that fractured kneecap and it was a preseason game, and it was like, my God, that whole all of the antics, all of the theatrics about, oh my God, could this be the guy that turns around the Clippers? It was out. They didn't even play the first season. So he comes back that second year technically, but first rookie year, and the buzz was real, man. Like there was a certain buzz around the Clippers, and I know it was a different team than what we saw when CP came, but you know, Baron Davis, and you had like that group of players where it was a mix of vets and young guys, and they're kind of just throwing a bunch of stuff together to see if it worked. And while they didn't make the playoffs and they were like a little bit outside of the playoff picture, that year, his first year, kind of like changed everyone's perspective. And you know, we talked about Chris Paul's impact, and Blake Griffin, like, sure, 6-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA, like 2-time All-NBA third team, 3-time All-NBA second team, I should say. And then obviously the slam dunk contest in 2011. That's when everyone was like, whoa, what's going on over there in Los Angeles with the Clippers? And, you know, the rookie of the year, the accolades, all that stuff, but how he developed his game over his Clippers tenure, like you remember this time, he was a guy that was not recognized as a jump shooter and really wasn't throughout his whole career, except for like maybe the 2018-2019 season with Detroit when they did trade him there. He developed into a really good shooter, but he was never seen as that. And his development, you know, his handle got better, his passing ability got better, his jump shot got better to where you had to honor it at the mid-range. He eventually developed a little bit of a 3-ball, but he didn't use it a lot. He had the whole NBA watching Clipper games. And it wasn't just about the theatrics, but like what he did on the court was phenomenal. And him and CP, like I will never forget those times because, you know, I would come home and I would be like, man, I can't wait for this Clippers Heat game to start. I can't wait for this Clippers Thunder game to start. I can't wait to see these guys play basketball. And celebrities were showing up to Clipper games. There's, you know, ESPN was televising Clipper games. So impact. I think that's the biggest thing here with CP and Blake is the impact that these guys had on making the Clippers a known name again and a brand that you can respect a little bit more.
It's really insane that when you look back at, you know, we never had consistent sellouts before this guy. I mean, he changed everything in the sense that the Clippers can be something in LA. Like everybody always says, oh, the Clippers run LA or the Lakers run LA. We're logical Angelinos. We know in our lifetime we're never going to surpass the Lakers, but it doesn't really matter because if we are selling out and they're always going to sell, they're one of those teams that are going to sell out even when they suck. 2 basketball teams are selling out. I mean, what does that say about LA as a basketball city, you know? And I think Steve Ballmer might have built the Intuit Dome anyway, but to me, there was no real like what's the proof that the Clippers could pack out a stadium on a nightly basis before Blake Griffin? You know what I'm saying? It's you have to produce a great team, you know, to potentially get that. We were just we weren't even a good team that 2010-11 season. We were 32-50, but we were still packing Staples Center out because Blake was, you just knew you could see something insane every night. And you mentioned the maturation of his game. You know, that 2014 season, he took a big leap. His play, he had like point forward type abilities. I mentioned the assist numbers earlier, and then I think it really showed in that 2015 playoff run. He definitely deserves smoke for that game 6. There's no doubt about it. But games 1 and 2 without Chris Paul, we literally stole a game in Houston, and this guy was looking like a point forward out there. I mean, the short roll passing with him and DJ in the dunker spot after Chris Paul would, get blitzed or something. It was just something beautiful. And as you said, extending his range, for Blake Griffin, 5 of his 6 All-Star appearances with the Clippers, all of his second team All-NBA appearances with the Clippers, and of course the Rookie of the Year, the Slam Dunk Championship. But I just think the feeling that Blake Griffin gave us as fans, you wanted to see him succeed because, this is something that we haven't had in recent years, is that homegrown star. And that's something that for me as a fan, I really miss because Blake had his flaws. Sometimes to me, he wasn't be aggressive enough down low. After he started getting injuries, he started extending his range, I felt like, oh my God, he's getting PJ Tucker on a switch. I want him to go at it every time.
Settling.
Yeah, like just a little bit settling because maybe he was afraid to get injured or whatnot. And he had his frustrating moments. I mean, there were times late in games where he would just like fumble the ball or lose the ball. But I was willing to die on a sinking ship with Blake Griffin every year till he retired because he was our own. He was one of us. So that's why it was really hard to say goodbye to him. And I do obviously feel some sort of way about the way that we did Blake Griffin after all he did for us. And hopefully that, fence is mended one day, that he can come back and be celebrated in front of the stadium that he essentially helped build in so many ways. I think that's massive. For me, I'm going to give Blake the edge of the best Clipper of all time. But as I said, it's like maybe Chris Paul can change my opinion on that this year, but it's 1A, 1B with those two. I don't think any logical person would deny that. So shout out to Blake Griffin. But coming up, the fun stuff. Who gets the last 2 spots? I feel like it's super inconclusive. Me and Money Mona going to go back and forth on this one. I got to tell you a little something about Game Time. Have you ever been in a situation where you're getting off work, you don't know who can come with you to a game, so you haven't bought tickets yet and you're just waiting for the last minute? Well, Game Time makes it easier to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. And with the money you save on tickets, you can go harder when it comes to food, merch, or whatever it may be. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch. I used it for the NLCS Game 1 against the Mets last year for the Dodgers, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views so you can know exactly where you're sitting, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Before I got my Swell Pass last year, I used it for the Clippers as well. Got some decent deals, definitely better than what people were getting on StubHub. So check it out if you're in need of a last-minute ticket to anything. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, talking about the Clippers Mount Rushmore. Some fans requested this episode. I know with the Clippers, we're not the Celtics or the Lakers, or we have all these incredible choices of guys that have won so many titles for us. We haven't even been to the finals. But there's 2 names that are unanimous when it comes to the LA Clippers. It is Blake Griffin and Chris Paul. Now, I'm going to throw out a bunch of names out there that I think should be in consideration. There's obviously Kawhi Leonard. There's Paul George. There's Elton Brand. There's Danny Manning. There's DeAndre Jordan. And I think it probably ends there. But if you want to get generous, we can maybe start saying maybe if it's a Zubats, he spent some years there. Maybe you got
Corey
Maggette, Chris Kaman. See, I would mention the Knuckleheads guys, but no playoff appearances. I just feel like they can't be on the Mount Rushmore personally, as much as I have appreciation for what Darius Miles, Quentin Richardson, and Lamar Odom and those guys brought to the table. I don't think he'd be on the Clippers Mount Rushmore, but I think in terms of fan love, I think Lou and Jamal would get a lot of votes in that aspect. I will say this, just because I felt like two players weren't deserving. I think the most important Clipper of all time didn't ever wear a Clipper jersey once.
Who are you talking about?
Ralph Lawler.
Oh my God. Yeah. You know what? I also had this conversation. Go ahead. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, it's just, to me, there's no greater Clipper than Ralph Lawler. I think he's the longest tenured in terms of with our organization, as far as I know. He literally made a bad team watchable because he had natural enthusiasm. I mean, getting through those seasons with no hope and having that enthusiasm in his voice, he was part of the reason that I stuck being a Clipper fan, even though, because the year that I became a Clipper fan was 05-06, we were good. So that was the reason why I became a fan, is because we were good. But part of the reason why I wanted to stick around for the ride is because I just loved hearing Ralph Lawler say, "Oh me, oh my!" Like, it just
that was pretty good. You've been studying for a while.
I mean, it's just like he would just have those "settle down, Mike Smith." Like, those things were just great. It's the law. Like, all his catchphrases. It made me want to be a broadcaster. It made me want to do these kinds of things. So, for me, I've always said that Ralph Lawler needs a number 100 retired into it. I think we are in such great hands with Brian Seaman that it's crazy that it's like almost no one says that we miss Ralph, but it's like we miss Ralph while also loving what Brian's doing. You know what I'm saying? We're so blessed. And LA in general, you'll agree with me as a Dodger fan, we've been so spoiled with incredible announcers, Vin Scully, Bob Miller, Chick Hearn, Ralph Lawler. I mean, we're just spoiled. And to me, Ralph is the most important Clipper, just because who was here longer? Who was that dedicated? Ralph is he's just our guy. And I really want the younger Clipper fans, or the fans that jumped on the wagon after 2019, with 2-on-3, to understand what Ralph meant to us. So I know it's kind of a cop-out, but I have to have Ralph Lawler in my Mount Rushmore, because no player to me is like all those guys I named. We're stretching it. Like, the gap between, for me, Chris Paul and Blake and the next guy is really large.
It is. And, Ralph, like you said, he's seen things that, we didn't even get an opportunity to. Like, he saw the really bad years. And, I was obviously born in the late 90s. I was born in 97. So, I didn't have an opportunity to actually live through those 90s teams. And I know they made the playoffs a few times in the 90s, but, a lot of those really, really tough seasons. And Ralph stuck through all those. Nowadays, there is player movement, but there's also announcer movement too. Like, there's some guys that go to other teams and they get better opportunities for money and they go take another radio job or whatever. Ralph stayed loyal to the Clippers throughout that whole tenure. And he saw that the 2005-2006 run, like you mentioned, and then there was another gap. And then he got to see Lob City and call games with Mike Smith, and just hearing that voice every night, where, I talk a lot about Eric Collins for the Charlotte Hornets right now, and, Mike Breen, obviously, Kevin Harlan, obviously Brian Seaman. I tune in as much as possible. Obviously I go to games now, so I don't get to hear him for home games, but, there are certain guys that I tune into regardless of the opponent. And I know he didn't play, and we're talking about guys that played, but we're also talking about impact. The impact is real with the Clippers. Like, all these guys on the Mount Rushmore, sure, they didn't win titles. Like, I get it. But the impact of Ralph Lawler, and, we talk about the national games and all that stuff, but the local games that we were able to watch in that Lob City era, it was a blast hearing him, Lawler's Law, fasten your seatbelts, are going down to the, like, all this stuff is just iconic, and I will never forget it. Never in my life will I ever forget that, because it made that moment special. We talked about the players, but the voices made that special too. So I know I didn't even think of that, but that's a great point. He should be on the Mount Rushmore.
So should we throw him on there and only have one spot left, or should we just give him that mention and still go with two guys?
We should put him on there and leave one more spot, because then, like you said, we're probably stretching it if we're like,
we really are. So okay,
we are.
I'm gonna just be honest. As you know, we're born around the same time. I've heard a lot of great things about Danny Manning, but I can't speak on Danny Manning the same way I can as the other guys. So if anybody thinks that he's on the Clipper Mount Rushmore, please throw that in the comments. We made 2 playoff appearances in the 90s, 3 overall in the 90s, I believe, 2 in a row, I think, with Danny Manning, but we never made it out of the first round. So I'm going to go with someone different. Love Chris Kaman, but I don't think I'd put him over DeAndre Jordan just because of the longevity. When you look at DeAndre Jordan, right? See, I wasn't the biggest fan of DeAndre Jordan's game, but when we're talking about games played, he is number 1, even past Randy Smith. Minutes played, number 2. Field goals made, number 6. 2-point field goals made, number 6. 2-point field goals attempted, number 10. Offensive rebounds, number 1. Defensive rebounds, number 1. Total rebounds, number 1. Blocks, number 1. Field goal percentage, number 1. So that's kind of crazy. DJ, in terms of the longevity argument, has a great one. But then it's like, can I put DJ, who's a straight up – so what about – okay, let me ask you this before we go any further. DJ or Zoo as a Clipper right now? I know who I prefer on my basketball team, but who's a better Clipper?
It's still DJ, but Zoo's getting there, like you mentioned. Like he's getting pretty darn close. I mean, we got to think, like, he's been on the team since 2018, 2019, since that season. It's a long time. Like, that was before
6.5 years.
Yeah. So, DJ has the accolades. Like Zoo, I felt like should have been in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year, Most Improved, all that stuff, all NBA. Obviously, it's tough nowadays, but DJ was an All-Star in 2017. He was an all NBA selection, first team in 2016. He won a gold medal. He was actually on Team USA, and he won a gold medal as a Clipper, which is crazy. But and the all defensive stuff too. Like, he was a defensive menace. You mentioned the rebounds. And he was a core part of the Lob City era. We have to keep mentioning that era because, while DJ was kind of like the odd man out, much like we talk about like Chris Bosh's role with the Big Three in Miami, where it's like, oh yeah, they also had Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh was a really good player for the Heat and a really good player for the Raptors. It's kind of the same, not the same, but DJ was the guy that nobody really talked about, but he really probably should have a little bit more. And it just brings me to the point of, should it be DJ? And this is the question I actually had for you. Should it be DJ, or do any of the guys in the, I guess, current era, I guess you could call it the current era, PG, Kawhi, do those guys even have a consideration for it because of all the games they missed? Because you look at like some of their accolades and it's like 3-4-time All-Star, 5-time All-Star. It's like, whoa. It's not bad as a Clipper, but the disappointment and the injuries and the games played. So I wanted to see your thoughts on that.
I didn't, honestly, when we jumped on, I hadn't even made my choice. DeAndre Jordan, so like all the stuff you mentioned is great. The only thing I will say, this is going to sound like hate, but it's really not. It's just context. DeAndre Jordan's prime came during what I consider the worst era of centers in the history of the game. Marcus Gasol or DeMarcus Cousins were kind of battling for that number 1 spot, whereas now we're dealing with a historically great player in Jokic who's getting compared to the all-timers, the Shaqs, the Hakeems. It's just different. So I think that matters a little bit. So I think Zoo, give me one all-star appearance. I might take him over DJ. I just love having a skilled big too, but we're also catching him up in years. So honestly, I don't know. It's okay. Let's go to Kawhi and Paul George for a sec, right? I think Kawhi has, with this last season, probably gotten the edge on Paul. The only thing I'll say, and I know the feelings about Paul George are major, but the only thing I'll say about Paul is the memories live. The Game 6, the first ever conference final that we ever had. Like, I feel like I had more good memories live watching Paul George, and I've been to almost like every game of their tenures as a Clipper besides that first 2020 year, and obviously that 2021, no fans couldn't even show up. But from 2021, 22 to 24, 25, I have been to the majority of home games every single season. So it's really hard for me. Let me read some of the like records just to make it a little more clear. So as far, and we didn't even mention Elton Brand, but Paul George is number 1 all time in 3-pointers made for the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard is number 6. Paul George is also number 1 in 3-point attempts. Neither of them are top 10 in games played. Kawhi Leonard is 10th in steals. And Kawhi Leonard is now 10th in points. So he has made the top 10 in points now. And then as far as Kawhi's accomplishments as a Clipper, he did win the All-Star Game MVP as a Clipper, although that doesn't really have anything to do with us, but it's great representation. He made the All-Star team 3 times as a Clipper, 20, 21, and 24. Paul George was 21, 23, and 24. So they each did it 3 times. Yeah. And then Kawhi Leonard was All-NBA first team in 2021, All-NBA second team in 2020 and 2024. So he has some All-NBA nods. I think what really hurts about some of those All-NBA nods is we never got to see him finish the postseason run. And then one of them was in the bubble. So that was really, really hard to stomach. So for me, it's between – I'm going to give Kawhi the edge over Paul George just because he's still with us. But would I give Kawhi the edge over Elton Brand? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Kawhi has been on better teams, but that 06 team meant a lot to me. I think nobody would describe Elton Brand's tenure with the Clippers as disappointing. I think I would so far, unfortunately, describe Kawhi's tenure because of the injuries mainly as disappointing. So I'm going to go with Elton Brand as my last spot. And that's also a little sentimental because he literally is part of the reason I'm a fan. But if somebody was to say Kawhi, I'm not going to bat an eye on that. If someone was to say Paul George, I honestly wouldn't bat an eye either. But as I said, the gap between Chris and Blake is so big. I think if Kawhi wins one more series as a Clipper, he can get that spot. But we haven't won a series since 2021. And to be honest, Money Mona, you can agree with me on this. I don't think any Clipper fan goes back and says, man, when we beat Dallas in the bubble, that was such a great Clipper memory. Dude, the bubble sucked. For us, it just sucked.
I try to get that out of my head as much as possible. I try not to think about the bubble at all. It even goes back to when Devin Booker hit that turnaround jumper to win the game. It's nothing was really great about that. So I have Kawhi over Elton Brand just because I just feel like the accolades are there, and I know that the feelings may not be there by the fan base yet. Sure, fans show up for Kawhi now, and there's tons of Kawhi jerseys, and you see everyone's oh, when's he coming back? When's he coming back? There's that anticipation for him. Elton Brand was a multi-time All-Star. He was basically the guy in that 2006 season. He's a big reason why they made their biggest playoff run in their history that year, and obviously it ended pretty bad, but it was just a different type of run that they had to the conference semifinals, and he spearheaded that. There's no doubt about that. But Kawhi, I think people forget a little bit, Dime, in that 2021 run, yeah, sure, Paul George had a great Game 5 and Terrence Mann had a great Game 6, but Kawhi was unbelievable in the first round, and he was unbelievable before he got hurt too. He is the biggest reason probably why we tied that Utah series to get it to a 2-2 series going to Utah, right? We can't just dismiss that, right?
True. I think the biggest 2 cases for Kawhi Leonard is, one, he's the first superstar free agent to choose to come to the Clippers.
Impact.
Superstar, not Baron Davis, borderline star, superstar to choose to come to the Clippers, and did something that no one in NBA history has done, which is the finals MVP leave their team. And then the second one is he might have had the best individual playoff game in Clipper history with that Game 6 in Dallas.
Yeah, that Game 6 in 2021 where he had 45 and he just took over. That was the Kawhi Leonard that we thought we were getting in 2020. Obviously, he had some good games in that playoff run, but that was where everyone was just raving about Kawhi. They could go to the finals because of his performance in that Game 6, and obviously in Game 7 it was a different story. Everyone was involved. Marcus Morris actually had a great game. But Kawhi, I just feel like he still has time to add on to his Clipper legacy. And I know that he's still under contract for 2 more years until 2027. So we still have some things to see, but he was just an all-star in 2024. So he still has the ability to be at an all-star level. He returned from injury and was still really good at basketball. He didn't drop off that much. Obviously he built himself up, but there is still that fear factor from teams on the scouting report for Kawhi Leonard. So I'm going to go with him over Elton Brand. It's close, but I just feel like it's also because we're going to have, I feel like, more moments with him. Hopefully, God willing, we'll see how they deal with the season, this upcoming season, but he has more moments left in him, I feel like.
There we go. So Money Mona's going with Kawhi, Chris, Blake, and Ralph. I'm going with Chris, Blake, Ralph, and Elton Brand. Just to finish it off on Elton Brand, second all-time in points fourth all-time in points. But if you subtract Buffalo guys, Bob McAdoo and Randy Smith, he would be second. Ninth in games played, fourth in minutes played, fourth in field goals made, fourth in field goals attempted. So Elton Brand is up there in the ranks. So I'm happy. And shout out to Corey Maggette as well and all the guys that we left out of this. Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, Pat Bev, James Harden, and Zubats creating their own legacies as well in the moment. Terrence Mann, obviously fan favorite. So appreciate all those guys. Money Mona, this was a great time. Let us know where they can find you.
Yeah, find me at gmona48. I think everyone that's watching this probably knows where to find me already, so shout out you guys. But I do some work for the Sporting Tribune. I'm a big video and audio guy, live stream every night, and then I do some NBA writing for Sports Illustrated now, so you can find me there. But really appreciate you having me on, man. It's been awesome.
There we go, and hopefully we'll be talking more as we get closer to the season. Definitely going to talk before the season starts. And yeah, have a great night, everybody. Let us know your Clipper Mount Rushmore in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe. The age-old problem continues. Go Clippers.